SEO has been this thing that's been around since basically the web started. We didn't really consider it SEO early on, but to give a framework of why SEO even exists, search engine optimization. If you've been around on the internet long enough, I'm 33, I've been on the internet since I was 8 years old. I remember going to Microsoft.com every day just to look at like design changes they made on their website. But early on in the web, there weren't really ways to discover different websites unless somebody told you. It was like a if you know type of thing, or you discovered it on some other website that linked to it. What ended up happening is these big search engines started coming up and basically indexing and scraping the web to find information from these different pages to understand the relevancy of them. So on the early days of the web, you saw a lot of people just building websites around their hobbies like woodworking or auto mechanic repairs. One of my first websites that's still up is like about skateboarding. That was when I was like 10 years old. And I remember how hard it was to find websites about skateboarding. What started happening once Google started getting some prominence across the web, we started to realize that the way Google was showing results were so accurate and so good that we didn't understand how it was better than Alta Vista and Ask Jeeves and all that stuff. What Google had started to do early on was look at the information on the page and not look at it holistically as just, hey, this is a page about skateboarding, so let's show it. It was also trying to contextualize what that skateboarding page was about. Was it somebody who's skateboarding in California, Florida? Is it for beginners? Is it for advanced? So over time, from that time to now, we started to see the web evolve and change because search engines started using context on a page to understand what should we show to people to be the most relevant contextual results to help them see what they want to see. That idea, that whole umbrella is really SEO. It's showing people the stuff on your website that they want to see, when they want to see it, how they want to see it. If you've ever Googled for literally like any recipe, you'll come across these huge stories about how their grandfather was like a World War II war veteran and this potato salad was their favorite. Part of that is an SEO thing and part of that's a copywriting thing, but you start to see people play these different games with SEO, and search engines are always trying to like combat those games. What's happened over the past, I want to say 10 years specifically, we've seen people get much better at SEO, and we've seen the tools that build SEO get much better. The thing with SEO that tricks some people is that they think SEO is writing blog post after blog post about this one idea, when in reality, what you have on your website right now is more often more than good enough to just start running SEO on it automatically. SEO includes everything from the titles of your page to the images that you have and where they're located on your website. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. A lot of people think that SEO becomes this really complex, difficult topic, when in reality, it's just some minor variations and minor tweaks. Probably the biggest reason it's come up over the past 10 years as becoming more and more of a talking point is because a lot of tools like Webflow, Squarespace, WordPress has made SEO better and easier to do than it used to be years ago. Because years ago, a lot of it was just manual work. You had to manually define, this is the most important thing, this is the most important thing. Now, tools like Webflow will automatically take your page title, apply it in as the meta tags for the titles, and so on and so forth. It's just gotten a lot easier. But the point of this is that SEO really isn't that hard. There's a couple basic things that we'll talk about today that literally anybody here can start immediately working on and potentially see some results from it. But I want to talk about some truths about SEO because some people have this weird misconception. You can have a very, very successful website without doing any SEO. Like there are companies out there, I think Klaviyo is about to IPO. They're a massive email marketing company. Their homepage still isn't responsive and they still have issues with SEO, but they're a massive company. Like you don't need to do a lot to be successful and you don't even need SEO, but any basic SEO that you do is going to benefit your website, your visitors, and your users, full stop. The good part about where we are in SEO now is, like I was saying before, most modern web browser-based development tools, Webflow, Squarespace, WordPress, even Wix now, they do a lot of SEO for you out of the box without you having to manage anything. But at the same time, search engines are getting even smarter and sometimes just fully ignoring your SEO. So we're in this really weird space with the internet right now where we're recommending people to get better at their SEO. And at the same time, Google specifically is even ignoring some of the SEO elements you put on your website and preferring its own data over what you put on there. But just because search engines are doing that does not mean that you shouldn't try to do some of these basic maneuvers, some of these basic optimizations along the way. So let's just dive into some of the basic SEO things that we can talk about. I could talk about SEO for hours because it's such a easy, low-hanging fruit win for most web developers. But I'm going to focus on like 4 or 5 main overview topics, give some room for questions, and then we can shift into CRM conversation as well. So with SEO, the very basic, very beginning that you should worry about with any of your content that you're building online is good page titles. In the past, people used to spend a lot of time worrying about their URL, like, should I write how to drive a car or should I write how drive a car? They started to get hung up on these filler words, when in reality, Google and most people never see the URL nowadays and they don't really care. They care about the content. Your titles are the most important thing that you should be focusing on. I'm shocked at how many clients I've worked with that will have a beautiful website, but their titles are incredibly vague. Like, it doesn't even have the brand name in the title. A good example, let me see if I have one. I had a client, I'll come back to him a few times because he was a good SEO win. He sold vintage rock concert posters. So you're looking at like Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, these posters that were a very, very big deal within the hippie movement and the early rock movement in America. He would find these posters, clean them up a little bit, not restore them, just make sure they're in good condition, and then resell them. When we started working together, we realized that almost all his page titles just said rock concert poster, except if you Googled for rock concert poster, you're just going to find a ton of stuff of recent rock concert posters or artists selling stuff on like Depop or Society6, these different posters that they've made themselves. What I realized after reviewing his website and looking at his Google Analytics, the reality of it was the majority of his visitors were searching by the term vintage rock concert poster or psychedelic rock concert poster. And for a while, the client said he didn't want to use the word vintage because vintage doesn't make sense. And he didn't want to use psychedelic because his posters aren't psychedelic. We gave him a little experiment and said, let's just try it for a week. Let's start using the terms vintage and psychedelic and see what happens. All we did is just change the page title from rock concert poster to psychedelic rock concert poster. And we saw 30% lift in his organic search on Google. That was a very basic thing that anybody can go into Webflow, your tool of choice, whatever, and just adapt your title. Make sure that your title makes sense for what people are coming to your website for. Sometimes it can be really obvious, like you can be selling, I don't know, an espresso maker, but the difference between saying portable espresso maker and at-home espresso maker will determine how you appear in your search results. So try to get your titles descriptive, in line with what your audience is looking for, but don't worry about making it like 30 characters long. Just make it nice, short, sweet, and poignant. For most of us, like we have an agency website, we'll just have simple titles like home, services, contact, about. Even about page titles, this has been something that's very weird for me. I'll have clients where they'll try to name their about page something fancy and unique, but it's so fancy and unique that you never even would understand that that page is where the about us exists. They won't use something like about or brand story or founder story. They'll just say learn more, except that is so generic that nobody would ever click on that to expect an about page. So pay attention to your page titles. There's something that you can easily manipulate, easily change, and see a little boost in your traffic as well. This next one I'm kind of excited about because Webflow has gotten good at doing this lately, where it'll even recommend issues or tell you that issues exist, and it's proper heading structure. Any designer here is probably familiar with this. It's how I knew Devin and I were going to be a good fit because he knew this issue immediately. Headings should be in a sequential order. Heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, 4, so on and so forth. Don't ever put a heading 4 above a heading 2 because that doesn't follow the sequential order. You're always going 1, 2, 3, 4. You're never going to go 1, 4, 3, 2. This is a common issue I'll see with early designers where they will create a certain style and then say all heading 4s look like this. And then they'll use heading 4s as like a baby heading to a main heading. The problem with that is it creates a structural imbalance in the way the content is perceived by search engines and by screen readers. So from a search engine perspective, you want to look at your headings almost like a book, where the title of the book is the name of your website, and then every chapter has its own heading, and every subchapter has another heading underneath it. You want to create a very systematic, organized system when you're posting all your content. Webflow now, when you go into publishing, I only saw it a few times in recent testing, but it will tell you if you've accidentally used an H2, H3, or H4 before you've used an H1. On top of that, with headings, you also only ever want one heading 1 on your page, one H1, period.
I think he may have disconnected for a moment. You ended at, you only want one per page, one H1 per page.
Got it. I didn't even realize it disconnected. So you only want one heading 1 per page, full stop. It's getting tricky with Elementor and Divi because Elementor and Divi for WordPress, they sometimes treat titles and H1s as interchangeable things, and they're kind of not. I have one client's website where if they set an H1, Elementor pulls that H1 as a title. The main focus is you just want to make sure that you're using a title and an H1, H2, 3, 4, and keep it nice and sequential. For screen readers, part of the reason that this is important is screen readers will allow, well, let me take a step back. Screen readers are usually used by people who have some vision impairment. So as they're browsing the web, they kind of have their computer literally reading content aloud to them. Having H1s and having things in a sequential order allows the screen reader to skip sections and skip paragraphs. So it can go from H1 to H1, and they can kind of get the gist that, H1 to H2, they can get the gist that these are different sections and different parts of the page. So if the screen reader reads aloud the backstory on my recipe, they can say, you know what, I don't need that recipe backstory. Let me skip to the next H2, and allows them to do that very quickly. When you start going from like H2 to H4 or H4 to H3, it starts to create some like weird little issues with the way screen readers work. So you want to keep it consistent. This helps people who are using screen readers. It helps Google to understand context, because Google can just skim these headlines and understand, all right, this is the backstory, this is the actual recipe, this are the list of ingredients. It helps search engines better understand the context that exists on your page. Trying to see if there's any other note I had there. On the heading thing, because I said a lot of designers will sometimes use heading 1s, headings 2s, or 3s as like a styling thing. If you want to have a unique style for a set of text and you're usually defaulting to treating it as like an H4, H5, or H6, don't do that. Just treat it as regular paragraph text and set a reusable class. So if you know you want to reuse this as a headline over and over again, but it's not actually something that would be appropriate for an H1 or H6 tag, just have it as a paragraph, give it a custom class, and reuse that over and over again. The next one, which is an easy win for so many people, is alt text on all your images across your website. So alt text, if you're a 90s kid and you ever connected to dial-up, when you would go to a website, you would actually see some words appear before the image appears. If you're younger and you don't know why that's important, the biggest thing is sometimes you go on a website and you're like, ooh, I want to click on this image of Sonic the Hedgehog riding a surfboard. And you click on it and the alt text would appear and let you know before the image even loads whether or not it's what you expect it to be. Because waiting for an image to load on a 56K modem for 30 minutes just to realize that this is not what you wanted was annoying. Alt text was a very quick way to just be like, nope, that's not what I want. Skip back, go to another thing. Nowadays, what alt text is also used for is SEO and for screen readers. So I actually was in a computer science class with a kid a few years ago. He was fully blind and he was one of the fastest developers we had in the class, but he used a screen reader all day. So as we were browsing websites in class, you could actually hear his computer speaking out the images aloud. And his audio was coming in at like 3x speed, and you could hear him skip around the page because the screen reader was able to read the headings of the page and the alt text of images, so he could understand where he was in his flow. Search engines love using alt text because they don't have to actually look at the images. If a Google or any search engine had to look at an image to describe what it is before it could search it, it would be incredibly resource intensive. So nowadays it defaults to just reading the alt text instead, and it can get very quickly an understanding, what is this image? So if you've ever Googled like Twitter logo, you're probably going to find some pages that have Twitter logo not as the file name, but just as the alt text. So going back to that vintage rock concert poster client, this was one of the easiest wins we had. It was the most time-consuming task we did for him, but it was one of the best things we did. So he had these pages full of all these posters. It was basically a library of every poster he's ever bought and sold. Except because his demographic was so old, they were literally in their 70s, all the other archivists in this generation of those posters had literally died. Like the #1 guy who kept an archive and a library of all this data died a year before I started working with this client. And I realized this client had over 2,000 posters cataloged on his website, and not a single one had any alt text. So what we started to do is go through every single poster and give it alt text. So our example for this was Janis Joplin, the name of the stadium that they played at, or the location, the venue, excuse me. And then we'd show the location, and then we'd have the date and year. We started to do that, and almost immediately when you would Google psychedelic rock posters or psychedelic art posters, at the very top, Google was showing you like all these images that were most likely what you wanted. That's called SERP. It's just Google's way of showing interesting things up at the top. His was littering the homepage of Google because he was the only one that both matched the keywords and had a huge set of images that matched the alt text that overlapped with that keyword and created context that Google wanted. So from that, we very quickly saw traffic start to go up as well. And none of this was necessarily complicated. It was just us looking at the data, looking at these images, realizing they don't have good titles, they don't have good alt text. Let's just start adding it in. It took me about a month of doing that work, but once I finished it, he saw his lift in traffic and was very happy. But it became a twofold thing as well, because one of the beauties of alt text is alt text can help surface context and content for a page, even if you don't explicitly state it. So for this client, we had built landing pages for his most popular posters that he's ever sold. We went by popularity and the highest sold. I think he sold a Grateful Dead poster for $56,000 once, and he had bought it for like $2,000. So on this page, we just had listed a bunch of Grateful Dead posters, but we had literally just forgotten to say that you can sell your posters to him through this website. But we started to get hundreds of people coming to his website, and we realized that we could just add a little chat widget to talk to him. And the website, he was flooded with 7 leads a day of just people saying, I want to buy this Grateful Dead poster, or I have this Grateful Dead poster to sell. Can we talk about it? So he got these leads exactly how he wanted. And all we did was just add alt text to the images and started to improve the page in organic search. The final basic SEO tip that I'll say everybody here could learn from is looking at your Google page speed / Lighthouse results. I'm going to be clear about this because it's a little bit funky. Page speed / Lighthouse are kind of the same thing. The important thing to note, Google Lighthouse is available in every version of Chrome that exists right now. If you open up your dev tools, to the far right, you'll see Lighthouse. Here's the rub though. That Lighthouse that you're seeing built into your browser is usually a newer version than what is running on Google's PageSpeed website. Because Google's PageSpeed website does 2 things uniquely, and that's they run an older version of Lighthouse, but they also average all the Lighthouse scores across everybody who's visited your website over a certain amount of time. So the difference is if you do Lighthouse in your browser, you're really only testing what your browser experiences in that moment. But Google PageSpeed is going to look at hundreds, if not thousands of visitors and show you what that average score is across all of them. For SEO, when you use Google PageSpeed or Lighthouse, it'll very quickly surface what are some major issues you have. It won't do headings and stuff like that, but it will recommend you images that are missing alt text or content that doesn't have ARIA labels. So it's a phenomenal tool to look at. But the area that I see a lot of developers and designers ignore is the areas where it talks about scripts on a page loading slowly. One of the best things I did for a client that I had was a dog food brand. We started doing some Google PageSpeed and Lighthouse testing, and we realized that their score was at a solid 11. They could never get higher. Once we started looking at PageSpeed and Lighthouse and looking at the data, we realized that who had built their website before, it was on Shopify, well done, but they had loaded jQuery 6 times. So every single page that loaded would have jQuery loading in the header and then 5 times individually within each page. It was totaling like 45 seconds of page load time. And they were all using different jQuery libraries. So because I looked at Google PageSpeed and Google Lighthouse, I could tell that these libraries were loading way too many times. We cleaned up some of the code. We reduced it to 1 jQuery library. Page load time went from 45 seconds down to 10 seconds. Still not where we wanted it, but it was a massive leap down. That same client ran into another issue a few months later where they had worked with a new agency, and this new agency had developed some animations using Lottie. Lottie was great. It looked awesome, but the problem was, and I actually tapped Devin in to look at this, Lottie was taking over 45 seconds to load just the scripts for the animation. Because I looked at Lighthouse and PageSpeed, it was able to tell me that this was the biggest factor causing a negative score on the website. After working through it, we were able to reduce that load time and actually change the way it was loading on the page. And we nearly instantly saw an improvement in our page speed and light speed results and a reduction in our page load speed. These 4 things are the most basic, simple things you can do to get started with SEO very quickly. It's good page titles and altering your page titles to make sure they match with the expected content the visitor wants to see. Great page headings, making sure you're using the good structures of H1, 2, 3, 4, keeping it sequential. Alt text on all of your images, and using Google PageSpeed and Lighthouse to look at some of those technical performance issues that are also reducing your SEO. I'll give you an example of how we wrapped all this together for that vintage concert poster guy. I talked a little bit already alt text and page titles and stuff like that. But when we started looking at the Google Analytics, we realized that he had like 80 plus blog posts as well. And we realized that with these 80 blog posts, around 50 of them were around the same topic, which was madness. And at the same time, when we looked at our SEO tool at the time, Ahrefs, he had a massive amount of 404 errors. So we started to combine all these different things that we were looking at. We were looking at page titles, headings, we were adding alt text, and when we were looking at the blog post, this is probably like my 5th recommendation for SEO, delete stuff. When we were looking at his blog post and we realized he had 80 blog posts and 50 of them were around the same topic, we started to merge similar blog posts together, create redirects from some to a better blog post URL. We deleted old content, and then with all of that work, we saw yet another 30% lift in organic search. One of the things that I see people get caught up in SEO is like creating content just to create content, hoping that the SEO will come with it. Sometimes what will happen down the line is 3 years later, you'll look at all the content you've made and realize you have a lot of good info that could be coalesced into one large blog post. Google loves that stuff. They want to find a company or a URL that's like a source of truth. And if you put everything together in a nice organized way, titles, headlines, alt text, they'll start to surface that content more quickly. I don't know how many of you guys got into the whole Pokemon craze a few years ago during COVID, but because of the work we did on his page, he saw a lift in traffic during the Pokemon craze, which was very weird because it's not related to his industry at all. Here's what happened. At the time when the Pokemon cards were being graded, there were two major companies that did it. I can't remember the other one. It's like something with the P. If you remember it, throw it in the chat. But the other one was CGC. He, with his posters, he was always sending his posters out to CGC to get professionally graded. But CGC's own website is terrible at explaining what the grading process is like, what the turnaround time was like, how much it cost, any of that. Because of those blog posts that we had merged together and cleaned up, a lot of these blog posts were talking about his experiences with CGC and the entire process of what it went through. So he literally had a blog post that just talked about how to submit your stuff to CGC, how long it takes, what the pricing was, what the experience was, and further recommendations. When we combined that into one blog post during the Pokemon craze, when the other card grading company couldn't keep up, CGC started grading these Pokemon cards too. And because nobody had information about CGC at the time, his website started to tick up in organic traffic simply because he was talking about this topic that people cared about. He had all the context and he had all the content on a single page that Google loved. So SEO isn't this incredibly complex thing. For the majority of people, it's simply making sure that these baseline things are correct and organized and cleaned up. That's what I got for SEO. I'll open up the floor to any questions, any
wow,
ideas.
dude, that's so good. This is like easily one of the best presentations I've seen at the Flow Party.
Thank you.
It's all killer, no filler.
Yeah, thank you.
The first question actually comes from me, but I think you answered it. I said, aside from accessibility, does alt text in images affect the SEO of a page? Which I believe you have confirmed, actually. But I want to tilt on that a little bit and ask, can you cheat SEO by essentially misdescribing images in a way that you want to drive people to your site, through that means? So you get the bump from the alt text, but you're cheating it in a bad way.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are definitely people and companies that try to do that. Google has been very aggressive over the past few years trying to find people that are trying to cheat the system and trying to tweak it. And not to get too in the weeds with it, but Google updates their search index. I think they've announced it like 30,000 times a day. They're constantly applying algorithmic changes to improve the way SEO works. And the big thing that they're always looking at is people trying to cheat the search engine stuff. So Google will take into account everything on your page, and everything on your page starts to get different weighted values. So like if you have a good title and good headings and good alt text, then you're pretty even, everything's good. But Google will algorithmically change the rankings based on the context the person is looking for, what they typed in, etc. So if you're cheating the system, most likely what will happen is the person will come to your website, look at it, and then leave very quickly. They'll just look at that one page and leave. That's why you'll see bounce rates are really, really high, because people will go to a website, see it's not what they want, and leave. Google will get very good at that and start to rank those pages lower down the funnel, or down the search rankings.
Yeah.
So you can try to cheat, but it probably won't work for you.
So Eric asked, how much does the age of content on a website impact SEO these days?
Okay, so this is a good question, especially in the age of generative AI. This has been something that in the SEO community, there's plenty of people that are arguing about it. My gut feeling has always been like the longer, the better. But at the end of the day, something Google rewards more is the page being updated more frequently. So like you can have a 7-year-old page that's has all the SEO juice and is doing really well. If you keep adding and updating content, that will look good, especially if that content is still within the original context of the post. So if you all of a sudden go from talking about this recipe to talking about car repair, Google's gonna be like, no, this sucks. It doesn't matter if it's 7 years old, it's no longer relevant. So old pages, awesome, good job. But make sure you're still updating them. Make sure you're still keeping it fresh. It's why you'll see recipes. This is a very simple trick. It's why recipes are such a good example for SEO. At the top of the page, it will show you like original publication date and when it was last updated. Google loves that stuff. It likes to know, hey, this is how long it's been, and this is the most recent time it's been updated. So it's probably still relevant, and it has all the SEO juice because it's existed for a few years.
Yeah. I don't really know a whole lot about SEO like you do, but I will say one other advantage to having older content too, that's completely unrelated to SEO, but very much related to marketing, is that when you have just like a large array of content, at some point people will share that piece of content somewhere else, and then other people will see that and they'll share it, and so there's this sort of like network effect that keeps happening that is totally unrelated to SEO at all, where yes, you've got the old content and probably nobody really looks at it anymore, but at some point someone will find it and they'll share it, and that will sort of like restart the feedback loop
Yes.
and get you going again and being the person in that space, that authoritative figure in that space.
Yep. That's exactly, and that's SEO.
I asked another question, and I think a couple people were interested in it, but just very generally, using AI to write SEO for you, thoughts?
Okay. I didn't want to touch on this too much because it's so controversial right now and people are still working through it. But
Yeah.
I will tell you that Google has flat out said generative AI content will not rank. I don't know how many of you guys are into like black hacking and white hacking and like white hat and black hat hackers are. It's like basically people who do good and people who do bad. I'm a part of a bunch of subreddits that do gray hat SEO and marketing, not because I want to implement any of that stuff, but because I want to know like what's coming up next. What's crazy to me is to see how many of these people are building websites that are 100% only generative AI and how quickly they're ranking and how quickly they're growing their businesses. Google's public stance is generative AI will not rank. The problem is the better AI gets, the least likely it'll be able to tell whether or not it is AI. AI has some issues with what they call hallucinations, and it struggles to have creative flow in the way humans do with writing, but it's getting good at mimicking it. So right now, my gut reaction and stuff that I've been doing for my own clients is I will use tools like ChatGPT and other AI writing tools to get over writer's block for a client's content, but I will then rewrite the content in my own words or in the client's voice. So generative AI to me is a great thing to start and get content out there, but fill it in within your own voice. Because at the same time, the point of SEO is to get people in the door. And once they're in the door, you're supposed to sell them on your product or service. And if your voice exists in your content, then they almost start to build that parasocial relationship where they can say, oh, I already know how Devin talks. I like his writing. I trust him. I want to work with him. But if they read your content and then they talk to you and there's a completely different vibe, they can start to kind of sniff that out and feel like maybe it's not an authentic relationship from the get-go.
Yeah. How do you know the difference between what your audience is looking for and what you're writing in the meta description and title, which is something you mentioned earlier with the psychedelic posters? Like, how did you know that that was the keyword that would sort of bump you up versus you going in and writing, well, I'm selling posters. I'm selling like vintage rock posters, and then making that jump and knowing actually this is what my audience is looking for.
Yeah. I'll give a list of tools here, and I can definitely tweet this out afterwards so you guys can see.
Yeah.
But specifically in this case, we had used two tools. Google Search Console. If you're not using Google Search Console, definitely set it up. Take a look at it. The big benefit of Google Search Console is it will literally show you the keywords people are using to find your website. Google calls them queries. There's some nuance there.
Yeah.
But what we started to see is people were looking for rock concert poster and eventually finding him. But there was a massive audience typing in psychedelic rock concert poster, but they were only reaching 2 or 3 pages on the website that happened to have psychedelic on it. But there was a massive disparity between the number of people typing in psychedelic rock concert poster or people just typing in rock concert poster. So we used Google Search Console and saw that data, but then we used another tool called Ahrefs. It's spelled out like the HTML code, Ahrefs. Ahrefs was showing us data that not only is psychedelic rock concert poster bringing a lot of search to your website, but the potentiality of it to bring even more organic search traffic is massive. And not only that, it's a keyword that isn't very competitive right now. So if you were to start using it, you would probably see a lift in your organic search.
Yeah.
So between Search Console and that SEO tool, we were able to decide this is worth pursuing and trying out.
Okay, it's a great answer. Joseph asked a question about a particular Webflow plugin. Maybe we'll get to that kind of at the end because I don't think anybody's really heard of that one. It's called SemiFlow. Baltazar asked, what is the most important thing to consider when transferring a site? I'm still a little terrified of screwing things up and losing traffic.
Okay, this is a good question. Before in the beginning, I said kind of URL like names don't really matter. When it comes to the stance of migrating one site to another, it absolutely matters, like 100%. If you are about to transfer a site from like WordPress to Webflow or vice versa, absolutely go ahead and get set up on a tool like Ahrefs or Moz or SEMrush for one particular reason. I'm going to speak a little backwards, but with those tools, it will notice if people are trying to go to another URL on your website instead of one that's actually present. I had a client where we moved, actually the poster client, this was a good example. We redirected 400 URLs that were 404ing to URLs that would work. Because at one point he was on WordPress and then he went to Squarespace and his URL structure completely broke. It was before like /posters/ the name of the artist. But on Squarespace, it was just /name of the artist. But we had hundreds of visitors a month trying to go to that old URL and hitting the 404. So the most important thing when you're migrating a website or you're deleting URLs from your website is to create redirects for every URL that needs to be redirected properly. So if you're going from, this is a perfect example because I'm actually working on this right now. A client was on WordPress using WooCommerce and they migrated to Shopify. Now, WooCommerce's URL structure is /product-category. On Shopify, it's /collections. When we looked at the data, we realized that people are still trying to go to that product category URL because Google still has it in their indexing. Google's supposed to be good at removing those indexes, but they haven't. So now our next activity is to create redirects from the old URL to the new URL. Here's the next important part because there's two types of redirects. There's a 301, which is temporary. This is like saying, hey, this 2022 Webflow conference page should now redirect to the 2023 Webflow conference page. And it's just temporary. We'll fix it later on. There's also a 302 redirect, which is permanent. And it basically says, this old URL you knew, forget about it. It no longer exists. Everybody should be going to this other URL instead. So with every client that we do this migration, we will do a 301 redirect if necessary, but we more often than not rely on a 302 redirect. So Google starts to index and know these old URLs no longer exist. They should point people to here. And then it depends on every client, but like 3 to 6 months later, we start to review those redirects and looking at the tools like Ahrefs and Google Analytics and Search Console. If we see that people are no longer going to those old pages because Google knows that the redirect should be in the new location, we delete all those redirects a few months later.
Oh, yeah, that's great. Because I think David Bain had a follow-up question, but you answered it. I think there's only two more, and then we can move on from that. Eric asked, how much does semantic page structure impact SEO? And I don't think he necessarily means like headings, like you mentioned earlier. Similar to the headings discussion, but more specifically using section, article, aside, etc.
Oh, okay. This is something I didn't touch on. It's called Schema. If you go to schema.org, schema.org, Schema is like this open source standard that basically allows websites to tell search engines and different tools what kind of thing it is. So if you know what Open Graph is, like on Webflow, you can set an Open Graph image, title, etc. Twitter, Facebook, all these different tools, they will pull from Open Graph to show you what you see. Schema works the same way. So if you're building a page and it is a recipe, there is a schema tag for recipes. So you can define like, hey, this is the name of the recipe. This is how long it takes. This is the average user rating for this recipe. Here's all the ingredients. Those types of things, I would say, are not very important. But if you want to rank in SEO, absolutely do it because it's very low-hanging fruit. Now, Webflow doesn't really have schema set up directly one-to-one with Google. You kind of have to play with the CMS and some extra code. But this is why a lot of people end up loving WordPress, because it makes SEO so easy. With WordPress, you can define your own custom schema or just pull in schema and say, hey, this is a blog, use the blog schema. This is a recipe, use the recipe schema. It is very important. And mostly it's important because if you look for a recipe and you just type lava chocolate cake on Google, the majority of recipes you'll see at the top will have an image, the name of the recipe, and reviews, rating, and sometimes the duration to make that food. If you want to appear in that way, the SERP feature, if you want to appear like that, get your schema data correct.
So that explains why like the caramelized onion recipes are like, it'll only take 10 minutes. Like, okay, sure.
Yeah. And then it's like 30 minutes of prep time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So last question is, I'm just checking to make sure. Yeah. What is the price range for SEO retainers for clients? And then I want to add to that. Aside from us doing SEO ourselves, when is it appropriate to refer our clients to an SEO specific agency? When are we sort of over our heads? At what point do we want to go, okay, maybe somebody who's better at this than me?
Yeah. The baseline that I would tell is if everybody hits those basic recommendations I made, good titles, headings, alt text on all images, and improved Google page speed, once you've got those nailed and you've given it a few months for Google to collect the data, at that point, you can start to decide if you want to hire somebody to help out or not. Like right now with Teller's website, we have some basic stuff. We're still missing some things because I'm tweaking things along the way. But I'm in this mindset of growing the organic search traffic. And now I'm planning to pull somebody on to help with the SEO that's external, so I don't have to do all of it. But now is the time for me to start looking at that when I'm in this growth stage where I know that I've done everything I can up to my point. Now I want more people coming in to help create content that helps me keep ranking more and more and more.
Yeah.
What I normally see is a lot of people will hire these agencies and pay a few $1,000s a month before they've even gotten the basics completed. And because of that, it takes them longer to see growth. If you're hiring an agency for SEO, don't expect the world in a month. It takes time for SEO to see the benefits. That's why I recommend people to do it themselves first, because you don't want to start spending a ton of money until you're ready for it. On average, I tell clients that if we're doing major SEO work, you may not see the improvement or results for at least 3 months. Truth be told, Google's very good at their SEO stuff. I've had clients see changes within a week. I've had some see 3 weeks. I've had some take 4 months. But the truth of it is, if you're about to pay somebody to help you with your SEO, usually the goal is growing with running the SEO and figuring out where to go next with your strategies to attract more people into your business. Oh, and the pricing. The pricing is kind of all over the map. I've seen this a lot lately. I've seen like $400 up to $1,000. The basic way to think about SEO is there is the content creation side of SEO, and then there is just the search engine optimization SEO, where they're literally coming to your site, seeing what you have, and tweaking it as they see fit to help you reach your goals. So if you're looking for content creation, you're probably looking $1,000 and higher. If you're just looking for some basic SEO management, you're looking at like $1,000 and lower. I've seen $450 to $1,000 just for management.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I lied. I personally have one last question.
Hit me.
And it's very specific. I remember hearing about this a long time ago, like when I was in college. I don't know if this is still a thing, but adding attribution to links, question mark? Number 2.
Okay.
New tab versus same tab links.
Oh, okay. New tab versus same tab. This is very much a UX thing for me. It's very much a CRO thing for me. Internal links, I always keep it in the same tab.
Yeah.
External links, I will sometimes open in a new window. I don't like doing that. It becomes more of a client request than anything. But I had one client that wanted every link on their website to open in a new tab. I explained to them how horrific that would be. And I did it anyways. And within 3 days, they had like 30 emails from their customers saying, this is horrible, shut this off. I hate using your website now. So from an SEO perspective, it doesn't really matter. But the thing that SEO people usually get obsessed with is like, keep everybody on your site. Don't let them leave. Don't let them leave.
That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, I've been of two minds of that. Like, I get it. Don't let them leave. You want them to stay there. But I'm also always of this thing of give information away for free,
Yeah.
provide value and context to people. They will trust you and they will come back to you as a source of truth and they will gladly pay you money.
Yeah.
From a UX perspective, I think all links should open in the same window, but every once in a while, external links should maybe open in a new one.
Cool. That was great. Thank you.
Welcome.
Google's not fond of closed environments. Well, Google and Apple.
Yeah. What time does this normally finish at? It's usually at the hour, right?
Yeah, normally at the hour, but I think that we had we had legitimately good questions in here.
Yeah, like I know we were planning about talking CRM. We can push that off if we want to keep talking about SEO. I'm totally cool with that.
Yeah, what do you feel like doing? What are you guys watching feel like doing?
Yeah, drop in.
Should we do CRM stuff? I'm pretty awful at CRM. It was actually kind of embarrassing.
I'm down for CRM. I'm looking at some of the chat right here.
Yeah, you're here. Let's do this. Let's do the CRM. Why not?
Let's do CRM. Okay. CRM. All right, Omkar. All right. CRM. So what is it? Customer relationship management. I hate that term because it sounds so corporate-y. Here's the main gist with CRM and the way I use it. CRM follows one major principle. What gets measured gets managed. Around a year and a half ago, I started running into this weird issue where I kept getting leads and a lot of them, but they were for platforms that I no longer wanted to work in. To give you guys context, I started Teller 5 years ago, but I only moved to an agency within the past year or so. And I switched away from supporting people on Squarespace and WordPress to focusing more on Shopify and Webflow. But I kept getting leads in WordPress and Squarespace, or so I thought. So what I started to do is build my little CRM. And I use ClickUp. I'll share my screen and show you a demo of what it looks like. But within my CRM, I kept it very simple. I have the client's name, I have their business name, I have their contact information, and then I started to put in what platforms they were on. And that was all I did. So every time I had a call with the client and they tell me, oh, we're on WordPress, beautiful. I'd add WordPress as the platform, just in the little columns. You can imagine like a spreadsheet. And every time they were Shopify, I'd put Shopify, so on and so forth. What that started to do for me is understand that in these conversations, hey, I don't want to work with WordPress, Squarespace people as often, but there may be an opportunity. Because what building a CRM starts to allow you to do is learn what these different businesses are looking for and potentially give them unique services that fit, even if it's not in the grand scheme of everything you're doing. So for example, even though I'm not really working on Squarespace nowadays for newer clients, I've actually just signed on a new client in the past 2 months because I'm now starting to offer Google Ads. And I realized that working in Squarespace and doing Google Ads is a very easy thing to do. And because I had the conversation with the client and I understood the scope of their work, I realized I could pull them on into the agency, use them as a testing ground to learn how I do everything, and then start offering this to the Shopify and Webflow clients as well. The CRM just created basically a system where I can review the people I'm talking to, what I'm learning through them, what platforms they're on, and it starts to help me understand, am I moving in the direction I want to go? Over time, one of my favorite things that I added, and I'll show everybody here this, is green flags and red flags. So immediately in the call, while they're talking, I'll start adding green flags. They're very nice. They have a good budget. They're educated in the sense that they understand how the web basically works. And red flags, my number one red flag I added was ghosts. The amount of people that I would have that ghost calls or meetings started to get ridiculous. So immediately red flag, ghosts, or late payments, or impatient. These are things that within the first few calls, you start to discover and you can add to your clients. My rule was if the person has more than 2 red flags, it's a no. The majority of clients that ended up having 1 red flag, it usually was more of a learning process to get them over that red flag for them to understand our own process. So the CRM, and I'll share my screen in just a few moments, but the way I was using it was just a way to track, are these conversations I'm having in the right sphere? Are these conversations what I want to be doing? Over time, I've also added what their budget was, what my estimated project cost would be, what an estimated monthly revenue would be. And I started to add more and more and more information. And what started to happen is I could find patterns of what I liked and the people I would want to work with. So that I could understand, hey, maybe this Squarespace client has a smaller budget, but the amount of work they have to actually do is very minimal, and all they have are green flags. I could easily take them on, get them into my system, learn from them, and take those skills to another client. But then I have other clients like with Devin that we just had a conversation a few weeks ago. Client had a good conversation. I think our budget was a little bit out of what they expected. But along the way, I also realized that they were a client that maybe we wouldn't be a good fit because we would have to do a lot of hand holding through the process. So even though it was like a perfect fit in every other way and the pricing was, we thought, very good, the pricing didn't match with them. And they were a client that we knew we would have to hand hold through the whole process. And it wasn't a good fit, no matter how much money it was. So I'm going to show my CRM here. And I'll
Extremely fair, if I might add.
Yes, extreme.
Generous, even, yeah.
Very generous compared to the numbers that they shared with us at the time.
Yeah.
All right, let me share my screen here, and I will.
Who knows? Maybe one day they'll come back to us. If you're watching, we're ready for you.
You guys can see my screen, I'm assuming, right?
Yes.
Beautiful. All right, so this is my little demo CRM. Here's the one thing. My CRM does not match HubSpot or any of these other big CRM tools. I've built something that works for me, but more importantly, something that I can adapt and grow as I see fit and as I need to, and something that I can fill in while I'm on a phone call with people. So within my CRM process, people actually are part of a stage. I'm going to move this over temporarily. They have multiple different stages they can be a part of. They are active, they are onboarded or onboarding, lead, lost, rejected, closed, and inactive. I use these terms a little bit differently than some other companies do, but it's what works for me. So in this case here, I've actually been onboarding a client this week, and I would give them an onboarding tag. The purpose of that is so that my interns can also see that we're onboarding a new client and they understand the coming workload that's happening for them. A client that's a lead is just a client that somebody said, hey, I've got somebody that needs X, Y, and Z. You might be a good fit. I throw them into the lead bucket. Lost is the one that I hate doing, but lost is the one where the client just ends up ghosting or disappearing, or something happens within our conversation that I realize we're absolutely not a good fit and we're probably going to hate each other. So I just mark it as lost and kind of walk away. Rejected, only 2 people have ever gotten the rejected stage, and those are people that have had multiple red flags. These are people that immediately in the conversation, I can tell that it's not going to be a good fit and we are not going to work at all in any way, shape, or form. I had one client that was pulling in $100,000 a month in revenue from an e-commerce store. And when I told him that the basic work we were going to do was going to cost him $2,000 a month to get him to double his conversion rates, he thought that was ridiculous, that was way too high, and that I didn't understand how e-commerce worked. Immediately, I was like, yeah, this is not a good fit, rejected. Closed is more often a client where we've had a really good relationship with, but we kind of have to part ways and we walk away. It's similar to rejected, but it's more that we've already had a relationship to a degree and we've just decided to stop working together for now. The reason I have this closed separate from rejected is because sometimes these clients that get the closed status or closed stage, they'll re-engage with me. I'm literally in the past month, I've had 2 clients that I haven't spoken to in 6 months. They reached back out and said, hey, we might want to work together again. Here's what we're doing next. So because they were in the closed area, I knew I could probably reach out to them. What also happens with having people in the closed stage that's very, very useful for me is as I offer new services that I think could potentially benefit people that I've worked with in the past, I will also send them an email and say, hey, client X, we're also offering this thing that you've been looking for before. Here's the success we've seen with other clients. If you'd like to talk about how we can bring it to you, let us know. Let's have a conversation. So the closed status is always, these are the clients we liked working with. We ended terms for whatever reason, but maybe we can re-engage and work with them. And inactive is just clients that are kind of like on a break, let's say. I have one client that hires me like every 3 months to get work done for them, and then they just kind of disappear. So I keep them in this inactive state, and I'll re-engage them more often. And empty is just empty. I haven't assigned anything to those. If you guys don't use ClickUp, definitely take a look at it if you're into it. I know a lot of people are a fan of Monday. I kind of hate Monday. I don't know anybody who loves Mondays, but I don't like the restrictions that Monday brings. What ClickUp allows me to do is create these custom fields, which I have 23 of here, that I can put into my CRM. So I can add their address, I can add their budget. I'll add 2 different contact emails, usually for 2 different point people. Same with 2 different point people as a contact name, phone, role, estimated project revenue, estimated subscription revenue. A lot of my clients are on a monthly retainer. I call them a subscription. Green flags. I don't know why red flags is separate. Oh, it's in alphabetical order now. Green flags, the number of hours I would have to work with them every month to accomplish the goals. And I just break it down. Industry has been my favorite. And this is where it comes back to what gets measured, gets managed. So let's actually fill this out how I would with a real client. If I'm on a lead, I have a client here, I'm going to write, all right, the contact name is Devin Fountain, and he has a website called www.reallycoolwebsite.com. And now I have just this reference of information to look at. From there, I'll say, you know what? Devin was really cool. He's motivated. He has the budget. He's super responsive, which I love. He's in my target market, and he's creative. I'm like, awesome, a bunch of green flags. And I'll go down my red flags. He's not late, never ghosts, none of this. Awesome, no red flags. And I move on to the next thing. This industry is what's helped me the most over the past few months because I've started to break down the different clients I'm talking to. These are all the people that have approached me over the past year and a half. People in the coffee, education, D2C, HVAC, real estate law, AI, and motivational speaker. What I like to do is I like to see people in the D2C e-com industry. And if at any point I look down this list and I see the industry is all over the map, like real estate, AI, lawyers, and one D2C, then I know that my business isn't focusing on the audience that I want to. So how can I start to attract those people? For me, it's as simple as telling people, hey, I'm doing D2C and e-commerce now, so I can help you out with it. But this industry filter has helped a lot because there was one point where I had like 6 people from real estate reaching out to me. I don't know if you guys have ever worked with real estate clients. They are difficult for a number of reasons, and I realized it wasn't for me. Lead status. This is the simplest thing that I keep it at. Cold, warm, or hot. Cold are people that I haven't reached out to but would eventually like to. So there's a coffee brand I want to reach out to, and I'm going to keep them as cold because once I email them, it's just going to be an email out of the blue. And then warm and hot. Warm is more like if Devin introduces me to somebody, and hot is Devin introduces me to somebody, they send an email immediately and say, I want to work, and they book time on my calendar. Those clients are feverish. They want to start working. They get the hot lead status. What I love to see is when I go into my CRM and I just see a bunch of hot or warm. If I ever see cold, then I'm usually like, maybe I'm going to take some time before I approach those people. And platforms. Platforms is where I start to break down all the different platforms that they're currently using. I keep it super high level. I'll have right now, we'll just say Squarespace is one of them. And sometimes the client will be on Squarespace and also be using ClickFunnels. So by having this, I'm filling all these fields out as I'm on the discovery call with the client. By having these, I can already start to understand, all right, I need a Squarespace developer or a person to support me with Squarespace. And since they're on ClickFunnels, I need somebody who understands ClickFunnels and landing pages to support me along the way. The point of me building out this CRM is to always know where along the process I am with the client and what's required to get them to turn them into a client that I work with. Estimated subscription revenue. This is just where on the call I type a price like, I'm going to make $3,500 from this client. One of the reasons I like ClickUp is it can do like Excel spreadsheet addition and basically say, hey, if you've got 2 clients under here, X, it'll automatically tell you how much money is potentially in, how many opportunities in financial numbers you have here. So, I've got 2 warm clients and I can potentially make $8,500 from them a month. So it's nice for me to know that because especially when I start looking at red flags and I'm like, ooh, this guy is impatient and he ghosts and I'm only going to make $1,500 from him, I probably don't want to work with him. It's not going to be worth the energy and effort. Project revenue and subscription revenue, I don't use interchangeably. I use them depending on the client. One of the clients that Devin and I were talking about, we were going to do it project based. So I could have put a price like that. And I can say for this one, something like that. So same idea. It just sums it up here for you. Monthly revenue is one that I'm going to remove. I've been working on that. Rate is just where I would put my hourly rate that I'm charging them, how many hours a month that we're working with them, and what the overall revenue I've made with them is. One of the cool things that, again, ClickUp does is if you have a client that you only work with on a project basis, you can let me add a subtask here. So project 1 and then project number 2. When you add your pricing here, I'll remove this and say 20,000, 30,000. You can see it's just calculating all of it with the subtasks. So usually I'll calculate these and say, all right, I can make $23,000 from them. I'll just add it to this revenue column so I can always see at any given point 23,000 right here. There's a lot here. My CRM is very custom to me. If you guys are interested in it, I can definitely share this template. ClickUp lets you share templates with people. I'll share this with you guys. You can go ham, do whatever you want. And yeah.
Dude, that would be awesome. I don't think I saw any questions about the CRM stuff. I think it's one of those where you kind of have to think of it before you show up because CRM is sort of a complicated conversation. But I think that people would probably love to have this, as a template of some sort, even if it means taking it into their preferred tool like Mondays.com or, Notion, like Baltazar was saying. I think that with Notion, setups like this tend to be a little bit more difficult.
Say if you're ever in South Florida and you want to hang out, I got a co-working space I work out of in West Palm Beach that I love. I would love to show you what a community co-working space can actually be. It's kind of culty sounding because it's that awesome. I really genuinely love it. It's not like WeWork or anything. And yeah, check me out. Twitter, got my website and everything. Feel free to DM me, follow me, shoot me a message, and we'll keep chatting.
Yeah.
But thank you very much for having me on.
Of course. Thank you so much.